Well, good morning. My name is Amy Alexander. I am the CEO and co-founder of a nonprofit counseling center here in Franklin called the Refuge Center for Counseling. And with me is Jana Kramer, and I'll let her introduce herself and how she knows about the Refuge Center.
That's right, because you can't technically say. Hey, I'm Jana Kramer. I'm got my page going live, and then I'm also on the Refuge page as well. And I am a client here at Refuge. Amy is my therapist and my amazing therapist. And Refuge has been an incredibly safe place for me to come and walk through some really tough things in my life. Amy has been the safest place. You've just been an incredible strength for me as well. And I just appreciate everything that we've done in this room. You've taught me so much about things that we're going to talk about today. And even when we were talking before we went live, you know, she's showing me the power and control wheel. And I'm like, wait, what is that? Sometimes I forget. I almost have like amnesia with the whole experience of things.
Which makes sense. That would be understandable. Yeah. So Jana had a new movie that came out on Sunday night, Gaslit by My Husband on Lifetime. And we just felt like this was a really good opportunity to provide some really solid education around this issue. So you're going to learn a lot today. And some of you may discover that it doesn't look like you thought it did, or you might be in a relationship that would be considered abusive, even though it perhaps hasn't escalated to physical or sexual violence. So this is going to be a really important time, and we're so glad you're joining us. I'd love for Jana to start off by saying why she took this role. This was an intentional yes. It's the type of role you've been waiting for. So why did you do it?
Well, as Amy knows, that we've done a lot of work around domestic violence in her room, getting through triggers, anxiety, and I told her that I really wanted to be in a movie around domestic violence because I wanted to not only share my story, but help other women going through that. And when I told her about this movie, I did preface it with it. I was a little worried about taking it because I didn't know if I would have emotion, if I wanted to bring up those triggers again, what would come up for me. And what you said, I've spoke about on the podcast too. I said, you said I wasn't doing it for me.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Although in a lot of ways,
it ended up
being for you.
Yeah.
You got to complete the stress cycle from some past situations and resolve things you couldn't resolve in real life. You got to do that through film, which is amazing. Very few people get that.
But it also, I remember calling you on set too. I was like, there was a piece of me that I was like, I thought I got through that. I thought I was already past that. Why did that come back up again? But I mean, you were helpful in that too, telling me that, my body remembered a lot of that. And of course that would come up. And
your emotions were appropriate to the awful things you had experienced. Of course, there's still sadness there and reminders. But this was a really important role for Jana, and some of you hopefully got the chance to see the film on Sunday. She did a phenomenal job, and part of that's she's a great actress, and part of it is that it's lived experience for her, and it's just a role that really, really mattered. Are you able to share a little bit about your first marriage and what happened in that?
Yeah, so when I was 19, I met my first abuser. Unfortunately, it wasn't my only one. But he was a lot older than me. And it was it started very slow. Just kind of how it did in the movie too, with comments. I was a little bit more overweight at the time. And so he would start making comments about my weight, calling me fat. And then from there, it became more of a just talking down to me, you don't have any friends, or just isolating me then even from the friends that I did have. And then with the physical abuse, it was, he was almost it felt like he was testing the waters. He grabbed me first and then it was a shove, and then it was a choke, and then it was a hit, and then it was a strangle. And so it was just it kept progressing worse and worse until the first night when he was, he said that he was going to try and kill me. And that had happened a time or two before, but there was a time where he said he was going to kill me. But I mean, I ended up going back to his house that night being with him because I thought it was my fault, which was just so messed up. I'm like, how could I even? I remember I lost a girlfriend over that night too because she was like, why are you going back there? And I'm like, because it's my fault. He said it's my fault.
So kind of like in the movie where she allows him to come back and sleep on the couch that night, right? She lets him back in because she feels bad. He has cancer. Yeah,
exactly. And then the 2 weeks after that moment, he said it again, and that's the night that well, it was ended up being in the morning, but that he tried to kill me, strangled me on the ground, was on top of me, and that's why that one scene was really hard to film because I don't like feeling when someone's on top of me. And I mean, just beating the crap out of me, choking me, and then that was the last time I saw him until court.
Yeah. And so he was convicted with
first degree premeditated attempted murder.
Yeah. And then he ended up taking his life in prison.
When he got out.
When he got out of prison. So you did not have the opportunity to really have full resolve around that.
There were some letters exchanged in when he was in prison, but I never got to have that. Like even in like I remember the letters, it was still never an apology, never and I'm sorry, never you didn't deserve that. It was I remember that piece of it, but no, I never got to have that that moment with him, which is why that courtroom scene was so powerful for me because I didn't get to have that strength on the stand with him.
Yeah, to look someone in the eyes and hold them accountable for how they've treated you. Yeah.
And that was also not just him in that speech too. When I was saying that, it was to the abusers after that as well.
So powerful. Yeah. Well, one of the things we want to talk about today is really what I consider the foundation of this work. And so I have been doing domestic violence work for 23 years. That's about a third of the clients that I work with here at the Refuge Center. And then one night a week, I provide services to the women at the local domestic violence center. I go and offer therapy there. And I've been helping there for 15 years. So this is a dynamic that I am immersed in on a weekly basis and have just the privilege of working with women who get to look their greatest fears in the face and most often wake up one morning and say, I want to live and I don't want to live like this anymore. Now, it's never my job to tell someone to leave. It's not my job to tell them what to do because, frankly, they've been in a relationship where they've been told what to think, what to feel, and what to do. And then they seek out help maybe from a friend, a pastor, or a therapist. And with good intentions, we might tell them what to think and what to feel and what to do. And in this dynamic, that can be re-victimizing. So our goal from the therapeutic process is really three things. The first is psychoeducation and safety planning. We have to learn about what we've been living in, and then we have to create a safety plan. The second part is trauma processing and going back to some of those really painful, distressing moments and working through those, maybe with something like EMDR or brain spotting. And then the third thing is self-discovery. So when you're in a relationship where it's always about the other person and your job is really just to keep the peace, you start to disappear. I say the self atrophies. It's like a muscle that doesn't get used. So when people ask you things like, how do you feel? What does your gut say? What do you need? It's so hard to access the answer to that because you haven't been allowed to check in with your body or your feelings in a long time. And so it's that slow coming back to me again and trusting myself. So in 1984, there was a project up in Minnesota called the Duluth Project, and they developed, again, what is the foundational piece of this work, and that is called the Power and Control Wheel. It's going to be hard to see from here. You can Google it as we're talking. Our marketing manager, Tate, will also share some links, but this is the Power and Control Wheel. On the outside of the wheel is physical and emotional abuse. Physical and sexual. So if someone sexually assaults you, if they drag you around the house by your hair, if they kick you in the stomach, you probably know that you are being abused, and the law will support you if you need a restraining order, order protection, those kinds of things. The problem is that by the time these things are happening, there were lots of other things that were going on for quite some time that frankly we knew felt bad, but we didn't know to call them abuse. So what Jana and I are going to do, we're going to go through the spokes of this wheel, and she's going to share examples either from the film or from her past where she experienced these dynamics. So the first one is using intimidation, all right? That is making someone afraid with looks, actions, gestures. So some general examples would be blocking the doorway when you don't want to be in an argument and you want to leave and your partner doesn't let you leave. It might be throwing something just past your head so it smashes on the wall next to you. You don't have any marks or bruises, but it was very scary. It could be displaying weapons. It could be harming animals that you care about, but using intimidation. So any thoughts on how you were intimidated during the movie?
Well, my first thought was a different abuser.
Sure, go with that.
I had an abuser in my past that would go like that, like to go to hit me, which would then scare me because I've been in that situation where I was hit. So it was that intimidation that I'm gonna hit you or I'm gonna come after you and get you, and that's frightening.
Yeah, I'm guessing that came with a certain look in his eye too.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah, and then you'd hear the pounding, of the coming to find, where I would then go hide in a closet or somewhere, because I would be fearful. Okay, now like I could just hear that pounding noise like coming to come get me, which then always in my brain then equated to me, being strangled or hit.
So it's a gesture that lets you know this could get bad really quick.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of puts you in your place, right? You start getting quieter,
mm-hmm.
or you back off and they get what they want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. The next spoke on the wheel is emotional abuse.
Can I just say one thing really fast? Because I've also come to your room and this couch, and I've been like, well, I've thrown something out of anger. So am I abusive?
Yes. Okay.
So I kind of want, because I think then that abusive, well, you threw something at me, and so then it becomes like, oh, okay, so I am too then, or something. So I'd like to touch on that because I'm sure I'm not the only person that's done that.
Good point. Okay, so we're going to back out of the wheel and talk about there are 4 types of violence with couples, and this happens in heterosexual couples, homosexual couples. Females can be abusive, so this can happen in either gender. Okay, but the first one is intimate partner terrorism. That's what we're talking about today, and that involves high levels of coercive control. It's power over, it's top down, and it means that I have the control, I make the decisions, I have the power over you. That's what we're discussing about. There can also be mutual violence. This occurs when you have 2 equally controlling and coercive partners who are both in a battle or struggle for power in the relationship. Generally, in that dynamic, neither partner reports being afraid of the other person. They are both equally coercive and violent. And then we have incidental violence, and this occurs when a couple might come in and they say, every time we talk about finances or every time we talk about our oldest child, things just erupt and we are both aggressive and we are both violent, but it tends to be situational. It's not persistent and pervasive. And then the final is resistant terrorism. And this is where one person says, I have been shoved down, beat down so many times, and if they come after me again, I'm gonna fight back. Now, this is not intended to establish power over the partner. It's intended to say, I'm not gonna let you hurt me anymore. This time, I am gonna fight back. I'm gonna push, I'm gonna claw, I'm gonna kick, whatever it takes to get them off of me. Now, where this gets complicated is sometimes then the police are called to the home. Both parties have markings on them, and it's very difficult for the authorities to determine who the aggressor is. But yes, do all of those dynamics occur? Absolutely. It's just really for the professional to ferret out which of those are we here talking about. Okay.
Thank you.
Bring me back to that point, because there's a really good example I want to give on the cycle.
Okay.
But emotional abuse, calling someone names, minimizing, denying, making them feel bad about themselves, humiliating them in public or in private.
Yep. In the movie, when he had the girl, or had the parents, when he brought the parents into it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. and made it all her fault.
Right.
And he was constantly insinuating, if not directly saying, you're the one leaving the family.
Yeah, that I'm having the affair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that ties us into the next spoke, which is minimizing, denying, and blaming. And that's saying the abuse doesn't happen. It's all in your head. It's your fault. You're making it up, or you're the cause of it. So no matter how many times you try to bring up your concerns or grievances, the finger always gets pointed back to you, and like you're the one to blame. So we saw that constantly in the film, didn't we? Isolation. This is controlling where your partner goes, who they talk to. It could be wanting the passwords to all of your accounts, constantly monitoring your whereabouts, checking your odometer to see if you drove the exact number of miles you said you were going to. But it's taking up all the airspace and feeling entitled to knowing everything that you're doing at all times. So how have you experienced that?
Oh man. Well, my first abuser, I mean, again, I wasn't allowed to have any friends whatsoever.
Okay.
So by the time that the abuse actually happened, I had nowhere to go.
Yeah. Yep.
And so that was a very isolating, because who am I going to go to? I've got no one. And then he was looking through all of my stuff, and I'm like, I'm not doing anything, you know? So yeah.
We saw all that in the film too, didn't we?
Yeah.
I mean, there was a point where he said, you don't have any friends. They're all my friends.
Yep.
Who are you going to go to? And was really threatened by the woman that you had hired to be your business partner. That was a threat to him in the movie. Yeah.
Because they can see. Anyone that has, they don't have power over that person. So like one of my old friends with my abuser, he did not like her at all, but she was very powerful, and she saw it, what was happening.
And would call it out. Yeah. Yeah. And with isolation, again, because we're trying to keep the peace, keep our partner happy, that's the only way to hopefully minimize the violence, physical, emotional, or sexual. We begin to get disconnected from ourselves. That's that self-atrophying that I was talking about. And that is where finding our way back to us. And sometimes it's really simple things. It's like, I love to wear the color red, and my partner never let me wear red, so I'm going to start wearing red again. Or there's a church I've always wanted to attend that I was never allowed to go to, and I'm going to start visiting that church now on Sunday mornings. So it's, what do I want? What do I need? What do I feel? And how can I give myself permission to start trying those things again? It's a very sweet part of the work. Using the children. That can be putting kids in the middle, threatening to take the kids away, minimizing your authority in front of the children.
Yeah, I mean, in the movie, well, that's happened in my life as well, but in the movie, how he tried to turn the kids against, like, mommy's hurting me, mommy's bad.
Yeah. Yep.
And there would be, to be careful on that part, but yes.
We saw that throughout the whole film, the way that he was, replaying the video and making it look like you had pushed him down the stairs, and then telling the kids, and we saw lots of examples of that. The next one on the wheel is called male privilege, but again, because we know this can happen with both genders, we now really call this entitlement. This is saying that because of my gender, because of the money I make, my title at work, my historical family privilege, that I have decided I am the master of the castle. I define the rules. I say who does what, who gets what. And you just have to follow along.
Sorry to interrupt. Is there a percentage of what women versus male when it comes to domestic violence? Like, what's the percentage for women, and then what is the percent that men get violence?
Yeah, I'd have to look that up, but I do know that it's 1 in 4 women will experience intimate terrorism in some relationship in the course of her life, and 1 in 6 women will experience sexual violence in the course of their lifetime. So very high frequency.
And then for men, we don't know that.
I'd have to find that. I do have it in my notes, but yes.
I'm just curious.
Yeah. And many times, statistically, we see that women use violence to stop violence. So that is another differentiator. But again, privilege. How did you see that? How have you experienced that?
Well, I know this is not in the money. I think money economic
That's
is
next,
another one. But they use that for, we get Tate. Thanks, Tate. just, my first abuser was like, I can ruin your career. I know everybody. Like I'm running Hollywood basically. So that kind of felt like the male privilege there.
Yeah. So it's more than just the relationship on the line. Mm-hmm. It's now your whole career.
Yeah. And then for the economic abuse, when we go into that, it was, he paid for the place. So he kicked me out of our apartment. I had to stay in the car, burnt my clothes, stuff like that.
It's hard to even talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah. And these are real things that women are living every day. And that's why we're here this morning. That's why we're talking about this. Awareness and education equals freedom. And the more you can learn about this is not okay, this is abuse, the more you may decide, you don't have to, but the more you may decide, I don't want to live like this anymore. I do deserve better. So yes, economic abuse is preventing you from knowing about accounts, accessing accounts, giving you a small allowance, having to turn in receipts, but you don't have the same decision-making power and knowledge around the family finances.
I got shoved into a stairwell at the Archstone Apartments in Studio City because I bought a bottle of milk and Tylenol. And he said we didn't have the money. And I was like, I had a headache and we needed milk. And I just always remember going, why did I get shoved in the stairwell for that? Like I was just trying to buy some milk and some Tylenol. So that was always like I don't know, maybe that's where my money, trying to hold in money because I don't want to spend it because I'm like afraid of getting, maybe that's where that stems from. Yeah.
And the hard part is that the day before, maybe he was upset about something else, and the day before he was upset about something else, and you never know what's going to upset your partner on that day. That's where the eggshells, tiptoes come from. Who could have guessed that milk was going to set your partner off? Mm-hmm. So you're always living on the edge of, is this going to be the thing or the day? Okay, and the last thing on the wheel is coercion and threats. If you leave me, I'll kill myself. If you leave me, I'll get custody of the kids. You'll never see them again. Threatening to hurt you or someone you love or damage your career.
Yeah, my first abuser took a picture of our dogs on the 101 freeway and said, if you don't come back, I'm going to release the dogs on the highway.
Yeah.
So I went back.
Yeah. And that is extremely common. Many, many women will tell you that their greatest trauma is around what their partner has done to their animals, many times in front of them. And why do you think that happens? Well, the message is pretty clear. You could be next. This could happen to you. It's so terrifying and you feel so helpless and powerless. And it's one of the reasons that shelters are now providing pet shelters on campus, because some people will not leave their abusers, understandably, because they don't want their animal left behind and harmed. And so now that they're able to bring their dogs, their cats, their turtles, their rabbits, they feel more free to leave. Okay, cycle of violence is next, but this was the power and control wheel. Incredibly helpful dynamics that help us understand what's going on. All right, so the next thing, and this is really the part B. If that was part A, this is part B. This is the cycle. This is the flavor of how it's happening. So all relationships start off in a honeymoon seduction phase. If they kicked you in the gut, if they assaulted you on the third date, you're not going on a fourth date. It just doesn't look like that. So in the beginning, it's hearts, flowers, and candy. It's, I want to know everything there is to know about you. It's compliments. It's charisma. It's all the things that you've been wanting and looking for and waiting for, and now it's finally in front of you. And it is so seducing. It's just like, this is the person I've always wanted.
The most charming humans.
The most charming. Mm-hmm. The most charming. Yeah.
So
good.
Charming. So good. So good. I mean, that's what almost draws you back to them.
It does.
Because you remember that charming human.
How good it can be.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, at some point, and it could be 6 weeks into the relationship, it could be 6 years into the relationship. I've heard many times, it was at the honeymoon, right after the honeymoon. Mm. In your movie, he didn't start to demonstrate violence until years into the relationship. Yeah. And that can happen too. But at some point, we start noticing the tension building. So this is where I'm walking on eggshells. My partner's unhappy with me a lot. I can't quite figure out why they're upset today. dinner was cold last night. The kids were too loud at breakfast this morning. My skirt was too short on Sunday. But we're constantly trying to figure out, what did I do wrong now? Lundy Bancroft, in his book, Why Does He Do That? He calls this the garden of resentments. He says that your abuser is toiling away at negative grievances and stockpiling them later to be used as weapons. I've kind of always called it the list. Your partner's keeping a mental list of all the things that you've done wrong according to them. And when they feel that the list has gotten long enough, you deserve punishment. And that's where the explosion occurs. This can be physical violence, sexual violence. It can be screaming at you in the middle of the night. Talk me through this.
I mean, yeah, it started with the most charming. And then, just like you said, I feel like once he got all the things that he needed, it becomes the massive explosion. And I felt it in previous abusers as well, in the house.
Unfortunately, it's not a linear process. After the explosion, we circle back around to honeymoon seduction and peacemaking. And listen, your partner knows your language of seduction usually before you do. It's the thing that hooks you back into the cycle and makes them feel better about what they have done in the explosion. This is not real change. This is meant to get you back into the relationship after an explosion. It could be, if your car's always breaking down, maybe your partner gets you a new car, but it's in their name. It could be they're getting up and helping change diapers more often in the middle of the night. It could be gifts, apologies. Let's go talk to someone. It'll never happen again. But the thing that's going to keep you in it, they know what that is, and they're going to play off of that. Now, the really hard part about the cycle is that the rescuer and the torturer is the same person. The rescuer and the torturer is the same person. That's what makes us feel crazy. That's what makes us feel like it doesn't make sense. We must be the problem. Now, the more often we go through the cycle, it picks up in intensity and frequency. It's going to happen more often, and it's going to happen more intensely. Some women tell me they go through this in an hour in their home. Other women say, maybe every year we cycle through this, but we're looking for a pattern. Now, why does my partner do that is an important question. Why do I stay is another question. So in the middle here is love. I love this person. I've seen them at their best. I've given and sacrificed everything I know to make them happy. The hope, the dreams, the possibility that maybe if I can get it right, maybe if I can just figure it out, they'll be this person all the time. The denial that, there's only been a couple of times that I got shoved. My lip was only bloody once. It's not that bad, and women have it way worse. And then the fear. If no one sees this side of my partner, if I leave, will anyone believe me? Will my church kick me out? Will my family? And we saw that in the movie, didn't we?
Yeah.
Where her parents...
Don't you even want to hear my side? Yeah,
Don't
people
you
don't, because they just see him as a great husband and dad.
Yeah. It's a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing where we only see one side of it. So, y'all, the power and control wheel and the cycle of violence are absolutely critical tools in understanding this dynamic. A couple things I just want to reference really quickly, and then if there's questions, are there any questions, Tate?
If you guys have any questions, please leave them right in the comment section, and Amy will give you the expertise that I get on the couch all the time. She's now sitting on the couch with me this time. I know. So yeah, leave your questions, and then we'll go through them.
Yeah, we were laughing. We never get to sit on the couch together.
She's usually where you guys are right now, so this is nice. Now you see why I go to her. She's amazing.
Somebody was wanting Jana to talk about the mental and emotional abuse.
Yeah,
that's
and for you to dive into that as well, Amy.
Okay. Do you want to do this first, and then we'll talk about that?
Well, I think, that is on the wheel. Emotional abuse is one component. And again, all these things are occurring usually before we hit the physical and sexual violence. But most people will tell you the emotional abuse leaves the permanent scars. The other stuff heals, can be covered by makeup, it's happening behind closed doors, but the emotional is what sticks with us forever. I have so many examples of women that say, It's those words he used to describe me. It's the names he called me that I just started to believe it was true. It's so hard for me now to think I deserve another relationship because I started to believe that.
Yeah, I often look back on my abusers, and I even said one time to an abuser, "You are worse than my first abuser." And he's like, "He strangled you and beat you all the time." And I'm like, "Your words hurt worse than that."
Yeah.
The things that he would say to me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
just because they're not maybe physically beating you, like you are in every right to want change and or I would say leave. But
Yeah.
I know you can't say that. So
Yeah.
but to get help and to know that it's not okay.
Yeah, and so many people wonder, am I a magnet for this type of person? Because I've had multiple unsafe relationships. Maybe I grew up in a home where this was the dynamic, and then I've dated 2 or 3 people that treated me this way. And I firmly believe that individuals like this look for people who are loyal, honest, kind, and forgiving. Loyal, honest, kind, and forgiving. Why? Because you'll stick with them, you'll forgive, you're generous, and they take those wonderful qualities about you and they use them to their advantage. And so part of healing is going, no, don't forsake those things, don't give those up. Those are the best things about you. You just have to use them with people who are trustworthy. Mm-hmm. So when you think you want something to be different, you need to create a physical and emotional safety plan. The physical safety plan, if you're going to stay in this relationship, then you also need a safety plan. That might look like if you're in an apartment or a townhome, there's a secret knock that you have on the wall that you share with your neighbors, and they know that if you do that knock, it means send help. But if you are going to leave, there's some important documents that you may want to make photocopies of and give them to a friend to keep in a safe place. Things that if they're destroyed, they're very hard to replace. It makes it hard to rebuild your life without a birth certificate, a passport, bank records, those kinds of things. So make copies of important documents and store them somewhere. You may want to obtain a new private email account, especially if you're going to be communicating with an attorney. A P.O. box where you can receive documentation confidentially. If you're going to leave, you may want to consider changing the locks, changing your driving routes, waiting in different places. I have some clients that maybe still take the bus and they need to wait at different bus stops where they couldn't be predicted to be found. Having someone walk you to your car late at night, those kinds of things. And then emotional safety. It's almost guaranteed that if you leave, there will be a moment, if not lots of moments, that you miss your partner. I just want to normalize that. Why? Because there were good times. A certain percentage of the relationship was very, very good. It felt wonderful and amazing. And there'll be a part of you that perhaps starts to second guess yourself and think, well, maybe I was over exaggerating. Maybe it wasn't that bad. The kids really, they miss their parent. I wonder if maybe they've learned from this time and it could be different when I go back. And so an emotional safety plan is an opportunity to write down the reality of all the things that occurred. And you might have to enlist some friends who knew some things to say, no, it was bad a lot. And when it was bad, it was so bad. Mm-hmm. But it's just a clear picture of the reality of the situation. And if you do decide to return, then you've got a clear picture of maybe what you might be facing. Another important document is called the profile of a batterer. There is no profile for an abused individual. If you are being abused, this can happen to anyone at any income level, any race, any age, any geography. There's a wonderful book called Not to People Like Us, Hidden Abuse in Upscale Marriages. And this says, hey, if you and your partner are in a high profile relationship, they may be less likely to put bruises on your face or things that could become visible, perhaps, but they're going to harm you in other much more secretive ways that are just as dangerous. But this talks about, these are the flavors that you're going to be looking for in a relationship, the warning signs. So things like explosive temper, low self-esteem, blaming others, manipulative and deceitful, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, a history of past abuse, isolating you quickly, breaking personal possessions, forcing sex. These are all warning signs. By the way, if someone has any history of being cruel to animals or children, that moves them way up on a lethality scale. That is someone who is extremely dangerous, and you need to safety plan for that. And then the last thing before, we just chat a minute and take questions is this equality wheel. Some of you have been in a number of unsafe relationships, and frankly, you don't know what to look for in a good one. You've never experienced it. You don't know if you deserve it. You don't know what it looks like at all. The equality wheel says, this is what you're waiting for. This is the standard. It's not perfect, but it's things like I can share my opinions, and even if they are different than my partner's, they're treated with respect. Or we share household duties, and we've divided those evenly and agreed on those things. There's a mutual respect around finances, and we make those decisions together. So the equality wheel is another great resource to look at. So today,
I was gonna say that one was always hard. Like I remember when I met Alan, I'm like, I don't know, do I deserve this, or how do I even?
Foreign.
It's so foreign, and it feels weird, and that was the hardest. That was the hardest piece on the flip side of everything, was going, do I trust it?
Do I trust it?
Do I trust myself? And then, do I deserve it?
Yeah. And frankly, sometimes you don't know unless you give it time, right? But you do have these warning signs that you're looking for. So today was by no means intended to be a comprehensive presentation on this topic, but we wanted to seize the opportunity to really provide some solid education for those of you who may be wondering, is this my reality? Have I been in an unsafe relationship? And once you know, things can be so different. So take any questions?
Any questions out there?
Yeah.
So one of them was what you guys kind of just covered, but how do you get past waiting for this to happen with your next partner, or expecting it to happen? And how do you communicate that feeling to your partner, your current partner?
Oh, that's a good one.
My therapeutic answer would be,
You have a lot of expertise. Go with that. Yeah.
is when I'll just say, like, how off experience with dating Alan. When I started dating Alan, I did trust myself more, but I also knew the signs to watch out for. So for me, one of the big things is he doing what he says, right? So like his words and actions were matching. So that formed trust for me. And then it just kept progressing. So I'm like, okay, I can trust this. And if something were to come up, I would know what is right versus what's wrong now, and what I deserve and what I don't deserve. So for me, it's just kind of taking it day by day, because I don't know if this person's going to switch, but I'll be able, like you said, I was able to end certain relationships faster
Quicker.
because I was able to call them out and go, oh, that's not for me.
Yeah.
That's a flag. I gotta bounce.
Yeah, the reality is that very rarely is someone in an abusive relationship and then never again. More often it looks like this. I was married for 7 years, and I finally realized what was happening and decided to leave. And then I started dating, and I dated someone else for 7 months. And then I knew what was going on, and I walked away. This time in 7 days, I knew what it was, and I got out. So we just progressively and incrementally start to trust ourselves more and believe our instincts, and that's really good. And, I think there's these little things, like your partner starts to criticize you more. That, they're on your back, they're putting you down, sometimes in front of others. And we're picking up on that and going, okay, noted. And we're just sort of watching for those things. Yeah. Thankfully, you've brought Alan in, gotten to meet him.
Yes, she got to meet Alan. Not that we need couples therapy, but it was more just, meeting.
I got to meet him, and I'm just really
very protective over here.
Thankful for Alan. Okay. What else?
So what do you tell your kids if you are being abused after the fact, or maybe in the middle of the situation?
Okay, so the question was, what do you tell your children? Here's my answer to that. We speak to behaviors, not about people. Okay, it's never going to be to your advantage, especially if your kids are under the age of 18, to talk negatively about their parent. Judges are also very sensitive to this. They will call it parental alienation. Now, some things your kids are going to see and pick up on is just going to be pretty obvious to them. But what you can do is speak to the behavior. So without talking about a person, you can say things like, it's never okay for daddies to hit mommies. It's never okay for a man to call a woman names, right? We can speak to behaviors, and that's really important.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
Yeah.
What can women legally do?
What can women legally do? Well, there is an amazing resource called Getting Free by Jenny McCarthy. That's N-I, Jenny McCarthy. And it's a manual for how do I find the right therapist? How do I find the right attorney? Do I decide to file a restraining order? How do I walk through a divorce? And you can even read it out of order based on the chapter that applies to where you are now. But my answer is you have options. You have a lot of options, and there will be people who believe you. Believe me, there's people who've been picking up on the cues and signs and just maybe weren't sure how to talk to you about it. But Getting Free by Jenny McCarthy is really a manual for you as you consider your next steps.
Is it possible for the abuser to change?
It's all you.
Yeah, yes, of course. There is always the possibility for any human to change. Now, abusive behavior is a learned behavior, okay? It is not a mental illness. Mental illness is separate from this. Now, can someone be diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder? Yes. Narcissistic personality disorder does not automatically mean that someone's going to be abusive. Someone who is abusive doesn't always meet the criteria for NPD. Mental illness does not cause abusive behavior. So what we need to do is go back and look at, where did I learn these behaviors? Where did I get my entitlement from? Where did I decide that it's okay to treat my partner this way, that this is how I get my needs met? I've got to go back in my family of origin, and I've got to identify where I learned it, and then I have to relinquish my entitlements and begin to behave in a new way. Is it possible? Yes. Does it happen very frequently? It does not. Generally, someone who is abusive just moves on to the next relationship because they are able to get their needs met at all times. They take public status, and their needs take priority, and they get what they want, when they want, how they want it, when they want it, right? So it's like there's not a ton of incentive to change. But can it occur? Yes. Has it ever occurred? Of course, but rarely. And there's some great batters intervention programs where it's a multi-week course and it's high accountability. They do perspective taking exercises. And for someone who really wants to change the cycle in their family, it's possible.
What is the hard part about leaving these abusive relationships?
I would say the hardest part is for me, it was kind of the shame, which is, it's interesting. I don't know, every time I get teary-eyed, I don't know why this one's always, the domestic violence piece of it all is always my hardest topic to ever talk about. And I don't know if is that the shame? Do I feel sad for the version that I was? That I don't know why I always get, but I think the thread leads back to shame.
Yeah, that's the answer. How did I get here? How did I allow myself to be treated this way? Well, and the tools we've just gone through answer that. There's every reason why we get deeper and deeper in the stuckness of this relationship, because we're isolated, because we're not allowed to talk about what's happening, because we're made to feel crazy. It's a really hard thing to get out of, but the shame is, will people believe me? Was it my fault? Am I a terrible mom? Will anyone ever want me? So those are all very real things.
How do you fight this in court if it's not physical, but only mental and emotional abuse?
That's a good question.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is not easy. And who your judge is and what county you live in, those kinds of things are really important. I think you can historically look at some precedences in your community for how your judges will rule. I personally take this issue very seriously in my community, and I have gone and spoken to all 4 of our circuit court judges and done this exact training to teach them about this. I'm also going to speak to the Williamson County Bar Association so that our attorneys are educated in this, because just because you went to law school or even went to become a therapist doesn't mean you got this teaching. So education is really important. Even having the chance to talk to your Sunday school class about it or learning about it in churches. But documentation is very important. So if you can document the names that you are called, the things that are thrown by you, maybe that, again, they didn't hit you, but they're thrown just past you, property that is damaged, any threats that are made, if you can document those things, that's going to be very important. And then it's very critical to find an attorney who does specialize in this, because they're going to have some important insights that are necessary for court. So look for an attorney who specializes in this.
How was filming the movie emotionally? Was it healing? Did it bring up everything back?
Filming the movie, there had some challenges emotionally. We spoke after the abuse piece, where the pillowcase, that was really tough, not feeling like I could breathe again, someone being on top of me. I don't like that feeling, given that was how my abuser was on top of me, and then another abuser that one happened to, where they tried to constrict my arms and hold me down. So that feeling again, even though I trusted Austin, and I, was so grateful that he was my scene partner in that, because he knows my history, but it's still, my body just remembered that, and it just brought all those triggers back up again. So that was a really tough moment on set. And then, obviously the courtroom scene was very healing, but it was difficult to bring the emotions back up. But I did feel lighter after the movie, knowing that I was able to shed some things that I didn't even know that I was still holding on to. 20 years removed. So
It's cathartic.
Yeah. And what what Amy brought to my attention, which made me feel better too, is taking my power back. Like, I didn't even know that I got to rewrite my own story too. So through Morgan's bravery, allowing me to be able to play her, I was able to take back a piece of my power and then rewrite the script and go, okay, no, I got to get up from that attack scene, and I'm okay. And so that was, your words were very helpful in me even being able to do the movie.
Yeah, we worked on some different kind of breath work after one of the scenes that was really hard, and I was just so proud of you. It just matters.
Once you get out, how do you trust that the abuse won't be transferred to your children?
So meaning, I'm assuming that question means that when you and your partner separate, how do you trust that your partner won't be abusing your children? It's very hard to know that won't occur, which is a huge reason why someone stays. And perhaps you're in an area where typical division of custody is 70-30. You're thinking about, well, right now when I see my partner escalating, I send the kids to their rooms and I kind of jump in front and take the brunt of it. If they've got my children on Thursdays and, Friday through Monday or whatever, then who's going to take care of my 14-year-old daughter if something triggers my partner, and who's going to take the brunt of it? And so these are very real fears, and they are a contributing factor to why some people choose not to leave. But remember that everything you're doing sends a message to your children. How you want your partner to treat you, how a marriage or a long-term relationship should look, how a parent should behave. And when we stay in it, it does send perhaps even an unconscious message that this is okay. And so those are decisions that every person has to make, but it's a powerful thing to break generational cycles to the best of your ability.
What's the best treatment for CPTSD caused by an abusive relationship?
Yeah. So the question is, what's the best treatment for an abusive relationship? I'm not going to say that there's one best modality. I use a lot of EMDR here. We use mindfulness techniques. I integrate art therapy, brain spotting, There's a lot of ways that healing can occur, narrative therapies. I think it's just important to know yourself, know your client, if you're the therapist, and what works for them. Frankly, for Jana, I mean, we've done a good bit of
We've done everything.
Yeah, we've done all of it, yeah. We've
We're
done
like, how does this
rituals,
help?
we've written on rocks, thrown things in, we've done it all.
We've thrown shit, burned stuff.
Yeah.
Like we've done everything.
And that the experiential stuff is just really important. But Jana's a great writer, and she does very well with writing exercises. And so if I will give her a few prompts, whether in session or as homework, she can release a lot through journaling. And that's not true for every client, but that's what really works for her. Mm-hmm. Maybe one or two more.
Did you get to meet the woman you played?
I did. I got to FaceTime with Morgan a few times, and her and I are hopefully going to be doing something, another way to be able to give back for women out there that are in abusive situations. So that's something that we are internally working on. And she's very brave. She's doing wonderful. Her kids are thriving. She's thriving. And I'm just, again, very thankful that she allowed us to tell her story. And it was very, very brave of her.
Yeah, it's a privilege.
And I checked in with her too when the movie was done. I just, said, I checked in before. I was like thinking of you. I can't even imagine having those eyeballs and, knowing, but she's like, it's a very freeing feeling. So I'm really happy for her.
That's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's good.
That's pretty much all the questions.
Okay.
Thank you guys so much for coming on here. And I believe, Tate, did you put the links to all the
Yes,
the
and I'll
wheels?
include those later on our side, on Refuge's
Perfect.
side.
And then if you are in the Nashville area, please come to Refuge because they're the absolute best. And just thank you for everything that you do and for doing this today.
I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you joining us. Hope it was helpful.